morning, everybody. My name is Reagan Sokolowski, and I'm a marketing specialist here at ESC Spectrum. Today, I'm here with two of our regulatory and reporting engineers, Sarah Gerasi and Suzanne Dybert. They will be giving a presentation on recertification and certification events. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to submit them into the question pane, and we will answer those at the end. All right, without further ado, take it away, Sarah.
Thank you, Reagan. Good morning. As she said, my name is Sarah Gerasi. I've been with ESC Spectrum for a little over 2 years now in our reporting services group. Yep, I'm just going to dive right into talking about certification events and timelines to be aware of. I haven't done a webinar yet, so we'll see how easily I can switch. Okay. The first, it's first important to recognize what particular event will require what testing or whatever it may be. So you need to first ask yourself, what QA tests need to be performed? Does the monitoring plan need to be modified? And is an event record required? And to find that out, I like to go to the policy manual. This should offer all the information you need. I found this easily by just Googling Part 75 emissions policy manual, and the EPA website should direct you to it. This is the section for recertification and diagnostic test policy for dry extractive and hot wet extractive CEMS. Throughout the policy, you'll notice that there's different types of analyzers and monitors listed at the top, so you just want to be aware of that so that you're not looking at the wrong information. I've done that before with the customer where we thought that a certification event was required, and it was because I was looking in the wrong section, and so we had to backtrack and delete that out of ECMPS, and it resolved a bunch of errors for us that we weren't understanding why we were getting. So just, attention to detail here at the top is very useful. And this is just me going through how to kind of navigate the table. So what QA tests need to be performed? If you're replacing a NOx or O2 analyzer, today I'm going to be walking through an O2 analyzer. So you'll see that you need to do a RADA, 7-day calibration error test, linearity, calibration error test, or probationary cal is what I'll be referring to it as. And you will need to submit an event record. Yeah, this is just, is an event record required? Here's where you will see yes or no. And then does the monitoring plan need to be modified? Here in the comments, you do see that the monitoring plan will need to be modified. So here are some tools that we use in StackVision to effectively record and report a like-kind analyzer replacement. You'll use CalLab. Here you'll monitor the calibrations. So your probationary cal, your 7-day cals, and your cycle time tests if it's required. QA and certification, under tools, you'll use the linearity tab, the RADA tab. Under tools in Part 75, this is where you'll enter your certification event. Data lab you'll use for assigning your new component ID to the new analyzer. If you choose, you can use LogBook. I think this could be really useful, especially if you're using us for your reporting. We can go through and see whenever you finished your events. And it's good for you to know, okay, I've done step 1 of this, I need to get my linearity done now or whatever. And then QA test deadline or QAInsight, it really depends on if you have QAInsight, but this will help you track your test completions and your QA due dates, because whenever you do a certification event, those QA test due dates for your normal QA quarter will be pushed. So it's important to recognize that and pay attention to your new due dates. Okay, so I'm just going to start my example of an O2 analyzer replacement. So you will be modifying your monitoring plan with your new like-kind analyzer information. You will enter the required QA tests in StackVision, and you will create a certification event record in StackVision. Okay, so I know I just kind of went through this, but this is how you would begin. Which QA tests need to be performed? And we're here at the top again because that's the permanently replacing an O2 analyzer with like kind. So just to reiterate, we're going to be doing a calibration error test. We're doing a linearity. We're doing a 7-day calibration error and a RADA. And these are just reminders of the timeline. So linearity needs to be done within 168 operating hours after your probationary calibration. 7-day calibration error test performed within 21 consecutive operating days, and RADA performed within 720 consecutive operating hours after the probationary. So here is just a reminder of the recertification notifications that you need to submit to your state or federal agency. For full recertifications, you must provide notification of testing at least 21 days prior to the first scheduled day of testing. Notification may be provided either in writing, telephone, or email. For partial recertifications, the source must notify the EPA regional office and state office in writing by telephone or email at least 7 days prior to the first scheduled day of testing. EPA requires for all recertification events in a submission of a recertification application no later than 45 days after completion of the required tests. And I can show you in the policy manual how you would know if it's a full recert or a partial recertification. Okay, so our first step is to edit our monitoring plan. And the reason you want to do this first is because you need your component ID to be in Stack Vision before you enter tests. Specifically the 7-day calibration error test, it's automatically generated and it will choose whatever component ID is in use at that time. So just to make everything smoother on you before you enter all your QA tests, I suggest making your monitoring plan modifications, evaluating it in ECMPS, and importing it into Stack Studio, and seeing that reflected in Stack Vision. So we're going to be adding a new component ID, component type code, sample acquisition code. You need the manufacturer, the model, and the serial number. And then you need your start date and time of the new component. So you're going to end the previous component the hour before the new component was installed. You cannot have a gap in time, even if it was offline or whatever you had going on. You must end the previous one the hour before the new one was installed. And then you need to enter, the component ID and start time of the new one. Okay, so here's an example of adding this new component ID. So you're going to go to ECMPS, monitoring plan data, and then components tab. So this 021 you see is my previous component ID. And I'm just adding in a similar naming for the next one. This is an example from a few years ago, so I can't speak to if this was a ESC employee or if this was the customer. So, I might have done something different than B or whatever, but I'm sure they had a reason at the time. But it's just whatever will be unique to you and make sense. Okay. And then now you're going to start and end the new component ID. And this is under monitoring plan, and then tab over to systems under whatever type of monitoring system it is. So in this case, it's NOx, and then our system component needs to be added. So I'm going to end the 021 on 5/25/2015, hour 22, and begin my new one in hour 23. So you base your end hour obviously on the install hour of the new component. And to export and start the process of importing it into Stack Studio, you will go to File, Export, choose the file that you would like. So in this case, the monitoring plan and your location, and then export it out. And this will be a XML file. And now this is how you will import it into Stack Studio. So you'll log in, navigate to regulatory programs, and then monitoring plan, or part 75 actually, and then monitoring plan. And then you would just click the import button there. I might have it highlighted, no, okay. Import button there under monitoring plans, and it'll automatically recognize which unit this is for. And then you'll just save, well, after this, sorry, you'll save. So for QA enabled parameters, you need to change the component ID or your calibrations. Basically any QA test you're doing with this new component ID, it's not gonna match up all the way, and it'll probably give you an ECMPS error. So you need to figure out which, or not figure out, you need to recognize which parameter is your QA-enabled parameter and change that EPA component ID to your new one. So the system ID stays the same. That's just about your monitoring system. And then component ID is the new one. And this is under Stack Studio sources and then parameters. And there will actually be a checkbox that you can filter for that says QA enabled if you have difficulty navigating which parameter it is. Sorry, one thing to note about this, actually, if you are replacing a NOx analyzer that is dual range, you cannot have the same EPA component ID on both NOx high and NOx low. So you will have to do it on the merge parameter. Okay, so like I said earlier, you know, this is just another important reminder of why you need to import the monitoring plan first. Your daily calibrations need to have the new component ID reflected. So you'll go back to regulatory programs, Part 75, and then EDR templates. And here I am not deleting the old ones, but I'm going to just add a new component ID here. The add button would be at the top. It's a little green arrow or green plus sign. And you would just add your system ID, your new component ID, your QA enabled parameter, and if you're reporting offline daily cals or not. Okay, and after that you can save, and once you open Stack Vision, you should see these changes reflected. Okay, now is entering your required QA tests. So your first step is to install your new analyzer and run a online daily calibration. That's your calibration error test or probationary calibration. So that needs to be done right off the bat. This will begin your conditionally valid data period, which is, I've always used it. I've always reported conditionally valid data for all of my customers. It's just to really ensure that if you fail a test or something, you're not going to have a ton of invalid data. So I think I recommend doing that every time. I've never seen somebody not do it, but there may be a case out there for why you shouldn't. So here I'm just going to take note of, okay, my test was done 5:26 in hour 2. So next, your linearity under Tools, QAInsight, and then linearity. Here you want to make sure that that component ID is the new component ID, and then you can change your test number if you wish. This one happens to have the old one, but you're not going to receive an error off of this, but just for your records, I like to change the test number to reflect the new component ID as well. Okay, and this is what I meant as well for, oh, this is cycle time test, never mind. Yeah, again, just generating your report, making sure your component ID is there. So here's what I meant for another important note to make for monitoring plan. This component ID cannot be changed. You see how it's highlighted in gray. The system is going to automatically choose whatever component ID is in use in your monitoring plan. So if you enter all your QA tests, I know it's easy to just go ahead and run your calibration and your linearity before you get the monitoring plan done. But if you do enter a 7-day cal without that new monitoring plan, you're going to have to redo it because that component ID cannot be changed. Okay, and then your RADA test under Tools, QAInsight, and RADA. This one does not have a component ID to be selected. It's just your system ID. Okay, and then your system will do this automatically once you run with the new component ID, but you do have to retroactively go back and change the component from the hour you installed it moving forwards.
Assigning the new component IDs in Data Lab, and she explained that you would go to the date and hour where you did the install, and you would change that forward to the present time or to when the new component ID starts appearing in Data Lab. All right, so the next part of the presentation is going to talk a little bit about the logbook and the QAInsight and test deadlines. Okay, so this would be in your logbook. This is very helpful that you could go in and you would put in like replace the O2 analyzer, and you would show the date and the hour when this happened.
Oh.
And okay, and then you would maybe also put in another entry like when you did your linearity, when you did your RADA, those type of things, so that like when they were completed, and that information then is very easily to use to create the certification event. Okay, so here's an example of the QA test deadline. And that would be like a new client and under QA test deadlines in StackVision. And this is where the information appears to say when the next test is due. So once you've put those new linearities and RADAs in, then StackVision will recalculate as to when the next tests are due.
Yeah, this is just the QA test status report. I like it better than the QA test deadline. You can see everything in an organized list and keep track of the times that you did your tests. And then this is a quick video of how to enter the certification event record. So information you need to know going into it are the type of event that occurred, your test required, your date and time of the event, your date and time of the last required test if it has been completed, your new analyzer information, and the conditionally valid data start time, which is your probationary calibration. So I'll just walk you through this, but it is a video. So here's, sorry again, this is under Tools, Part 75, and then Certification Information. And then to create a new one, you click this green plus button here at the top. Okay, so it was, the type of event was an analyzer replacement. Again, you have to specify here. So this was a gas analyzer replaced by a like-kind analyzer. The required tests, we went over this at the beginning. This is from the policy manual. You'd had a normal RADA, a 7-day calibration, a linearity, and a cycle time test. The calibration error test is not listed here. It took me a while to figure that out. Whenever you begin your conditionally valid data, that is with the daily calibration test. So that's how that will be incorporated. And then you would say yes or no to having finished your your tests, I'm sorry. So it is possible that you will have an analyzer replacement and all of your required tests will not be done until the following quarter. So you will, you would just say no here, but enter what you have. So your start date, in this case, it was 5/25, hour 23, but this is just an example here. And then if you did complete your test, in most cases, if you had a RADA was required, your last test will probably be that. Just because if something goes wrong with any of the other tests and they fail and adjustments need to be made to the new analyzer, you want to get all those kinks out of the way before you do your RADA because they're hard to schedule and expensive. And then just the source that was affected, your unit. And then this is where you'll choose your component ID, and this is in here because we entered that new monitoring plan. So here you see the O2B is our new one. You want to click use. And we are reporting conditionally valid data procedures. And this date began with that calibration error test. So that daily cal that I went over at the very beginning. Then you would just click finish and make sure, or I'll show you on the next slide what the details look like. So this is what it looks like when it's finished. So here's our event. It was entered on 5/25, hour 23. Our conditionally valid data period started with that daily calibration test on 5/26, hour 2. So you would, if you can't remember when this happened, you'd go back to Cal Lab and you would find the first online calibration done after the analyzer install. And then here is the last required test entry. So this was our RADA and it was done on June 3rd, hour 5. And then your event type, we chose that at the beginning, our required tests, and we're going to report conditional that. Okay. So this is everything we use to get these done. The Part 75 policy manual, section 12. It's question 12, and then you can scroll down to section 12, and then the reporting instructions for QA certification event data.
Well, I'm not seeing any questions. If anybody has any that they would like to ask Sarah individually, her email is on the screen, as you can see, so feel free to reach out to her with any questions that you have. All righty. Well, thank you, ladies. Thank you, everybody, for today. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their day.